Information and opinions expressed during the related show are those of the show personalities and guest alone, and not those of Vic Canellis Media Group, its parent, affiliates, or stations. VCMG Live is not responsible for any content, information, or opinions expressed. User bears full responsibility for their reliance on such content, information, or opinions.
Welcome to Making Money with Laura Sanders, a name you can trust. With over 20 years of real estate experience and selling over 150 homes a year, Laura Sanders is the #1 RE/MAX agent in the state of Florida for 2021. Join us each week as we discuss how to make money through buying and flipping homes, to renting versus selling, and everything in between. To join the conversation, call in live 888-994-4995, Studio A.
Hi everyone, welcome to Making Money with Laura Sanders, and I am your host, Laura Sanders. Every week we talk about something that will help you make a little money, save a little money, or maybe just help you navigate this crazy world that we live in. Today we're going to go back, and I know I've done this before, but there's more stuff in this contract that could get you guys in a lot of trouble. And if you're hiring an agent, you want to make sure you have somebody that understands what the heck you're signing. So you don't want to wait till you get to the attorney later on and they go, what did you do? So we're here with Nick Fiorello. He is an attorney at JK Closings. So welcome, Nick.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So we were talking the other day, and that's what made me think, oh my God, we need to do more of this. So we were talking the other day that there was an addendum to the contract. Now, I want to be very clear about this because I think this gets very complicated, right? We talked about on the last page of the contract, this is a listing agreement actually, so no, I don't have a contract with me.
Okay.
So we were talking about where you check off the addendums. Now, we had a situation where the date that the agent thought the contract was executed was the day that the lead-based paint was actually fully executed by the agent. You said, no, it's when the contract was signed. But the lead-based paint is checked off on the contract. So let's talk about that and clarify.
So going to the root of contract law, a contract is valid when there's an offer, acceptance, and consideration.
Okay.
The offer is
The
paper.
The 12 pages.
Exactly, that the buyer submits to the seller. If the seller, or let's go back, if the offer includes something that is checked off and not necessarily included with the documentation that's presented to the seller, there's a determination as to whether those items that are omitted are material or can materially affect or alter the terms of the contract.
Okay.
In the terms of a disclosure, very rarely are those disclosures filled out right away. And it's simply a disclosure. So when we look at the effectiveness or effective date of that contract, if an offer is sent over, signed, fully executed on the buyer side, sent to the seller, and then the seller fully executes it and returns it without that disclosure that was provided, it's arguable, but arguably that's meeting of the minds. The parties entered into a contract. The disclosure is not going to provide any information that materially alters the terms of that contract, where it's the purchase price, the closing date, anything that's presented on the 13-page contract that's there.
Okay.
So it's just a simple disclosure. A lot of the times those disclosures are filled out afterwards, especially a lead-based paint. That's very rarely included with the
But let's
contract.
say, because this gets very complicated. So let's just say an agent sends you an offer. They've checked off the condo disclosure. Now, the condo disclosure has become very detailed,
Yes.
very in-depth, okay? So they sometimes will send you, now I'll upload the condo disclosure in MLS, but in this case, they sent the condo disclosure without their client's signature, but they sent it blank and it's checked off on the box. So now we have to get that information filled out, right? If we sign the contract, but we're still trying to get all the rest of the information on the condo disclosure, is it a fully executed contract?
Again, that's a disclosure. So it's not something that will materially alter the terms of the contract.
But
Yeah,
it could.
there's very important information on that document, but it's not going to materially alter the terms of the contract, the purchase price, or anything like that. It's not going to change the purchase price. It's not going to have an impact where it significantly alters the terms that are provided on that original agreement. So again, it's a disclosure that won't materially affect or materially alter the terms of that contract, and it's arguable that you have an effective contract when you send over the executed contract that buyer and seller signed while you're working on the terms of that condo rider, because it is pretty lengthy now.
Yeah.
It's a 4 or 5 page document.
So then if they checked off on the addendums that it was subject to appraisal,
that's something that is very different. So on the opposite side or flip side, it's arguable where that is something that can materially alter the terms of a contract. Any of the contingencies. You have the sale of buyer's home contingency that can impact the entire transaction. You have the appraisal contingency that can change the purchase price. Things that will materially affect the closing date, the purchase price, all those material terms of the contract that are on that base contract. Now you have something that you can argue that there's not an effective contract when it's checked off and not provided, or when it's checked off, or in a different scenario, checked off and provided, but then the seller counters and doesn't include that back because the seller does not want appraisal contingency.
okay. So let's just say they didn't check it off, but when they sent their email, there was a separate attachment for the appraisal contingency.
So there's two trains of thought on this. One being, is it part of the offer? Because did they address it in the email? Because now you have to go back and look at the email. Hey, here's my offer. And then they just threw a separate addendum in there. Is that necessarily part of their offer, or was it an accident? If they explicitly put it in writing saying that, hey, this offer contains an appraisal contingency, and it has the information there, it's specifically listed in the email, then you can argue that it's part of the offer. They just throw a whole ream of documents at you. How do you know it wasn't put there accidentally? So if you return a contract that had an appraisal contingency maybe included in the email along with other attachments, and you just return the offer, the actual contract, back signed, fully executed at that point,
It's executed.
There's an argument that it's executed because it's not marked off in the additional term, or in the additional terms, or paragraph 19 where you're supposed to check it off. And there was no indication in that email stating that it was supposed to be part of the offer.
This gets very complicated. So, okay, I have other stuff too, but how often does this happen to you?
Every day, every single
What's
day.
the worst situations happen with a contract? Like where an agent lost money, it created such havoc?
Yeah, I mean, there's issues that can lead all the way to closing, but the main issue that we have is when items are checked in paragraph 19 but not included. But then another issue on top of it, another layer of issue, would be if the parties go about the transaction like they're under contract. How can you argue after 3 weeks of, the buyer going through an inspection, appraisal, everything that they need to do their due diligence, and then the seller working on clearing title and getting payoffs and anything they need to do on their end, and then to come back and say you don't have an effective contract. You have a meeting of the minds where two parties are working towards the same thing to close on a transaction. So the further you get along in that contract, the harder it is to argue against the fact that it's not a contract, even though you might have some semantics, with the execution of the contract. Well, you get 4 weeks past that and you're almost at closing.
Right.
How is somebody going to argue that you're not under contract at that point?
So, okay, so then let's just say that we have a contract that we have on that line where it says we want an answer by such and such a date, or you leave it blank and it says within 2 days of the submission of the offer, right? And let's just say that date ended on the 10th of March, right? Now they sign it on the 11th. Aren't you supposed to cross out the 10th and initial it and put the 11th and have all parties acknowledge?
So an effective date...
This is your favorite one to tell me all the time.
Yeah, so an effective date of the contract, it is based on having a executed contract from both sides, and then that executed contract being delivered to both sides. So if you have the 10th, for example, let's say the buyer signed it on the 9th, sent it to the seller doesn't sign it until the 11th. You don't have an executed contract at that point. So the seller would need to submit a counter offer by slashing that 10, putting the 11th or whatever date they want, or crossing it out entirely, and then sending it back, initialing the change, and then having the buyer initial that change.
But let's just say you're getting it back from an REO, which is real estate owned, like a bank, right? Or you're getting it back from a relocation company. How, and they're the ones in charge, right? So now they're like, here it is. We told you we're going to give it to you. Here it's signed. That's when the famous, let's find out. We'll go to commercial break and we'll find out what Nick says. The famous thing that Nick says.
At JK Closing Attorneys, we do all of the same things that a title company does, but with the benefits of being a law office. We can help with residential real estate, short sales, commercial real estate, refinances, 1031 exchanges, and FIRPTA withholding.
Contact JK Closing Attorneys today at 954-332-3111. Again, that is 954-332-3111.
Whether you're buying, selling, refinancing, or building your dream home, you have a lot riding on your loan specialist. Max Fish, a top 1% mortgage loan officer in the nation, will give you a same-day qualifying quote. Max Fish is committed to providing his customers with mortgage services that exceed their expectations. Ensuring that you make the right choice for you and your family is his ultimate goal. Contact Max Fish today at 954-729-6933 or max.fisch@nwmcorp.net.
You have been watching Making Money with Laura. For more information, contact Laura Sanders at 954-650-0827 or visit her website at laurasell.com. And now back to the show.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Making Money with Laura Sanders, and I am your host, Laura Sanders. So today we're talking with Nick from JK Closings. He's an attorney with the closing company. And by the way, they're a fantastic company. They can definitely help you if you're buying or selling. They help guide you all along the way. They even have a phone number that he'll give you to be able to text to with questions, and it is manned pretty much all the time.
Yeah,
I'm sure if they're drinking, I'm just kidding. It's manned all the time. They'll respond within 24 hours always. So
Yeah,
what's that number, Nick?
The number is 954-779-5000. You can call during business hours. That is 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. We're closed from 12 to 1 for lunch. And you can text it, 24/7. Of course, if you text super late at night, you might not get an answer until the next morning. But yeah, pretty much we're within 24 hours, you'll get a response, most likely much sooner than that.
Yeah, okay, yeah. And if you need an amazing agent, real estate agent, that would be me, Laura Sanders. You can give me a call at 954-650-0827, and you can go to laurasell.com. So we're here today, we're talking about the contract. This is like something that is kind of a little frustrating for me because I don't want to be the bossy realtor telling other people how to do things, but at the same time, like I have to protect my clients, right?
100%.
So we're talking about addendums. When's the fully executed effective date? Making a mistake is a big deal because it could cost somebody tens of thousands of dollars. But some of the things that we see is like a misconception, especially for buyers and sellers, is they think it's business days. And it's not per our contract.
No.
But some people might write it in there. So we're going to talk about what it looks like when it's business days and how that works. And then we're going to talk about how it looks when it's just our regular calendar days. So let's talk about the calendar days.
So basically, when the contract defaults to calendar days. Mm-hmm. So there is everything in the contract's based on calendar days, and that's based on a counting period of the next day is day one.
So if I sign a contract today is the 18th of March, and I say I'm selling my house and I sign, today is the 18th. Tomorrow counts day one of those if it's 10-day inspection or 21-day loan commitment.
So going back to the effective date, if we have a fully executed contract delivered to both parties, then that day is day 0. That's the first day of the contract, you're day 0. So then, like you said, the next day, if you have a 10-day inspection period, the next day is day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4.
And it counts even through Saturday and Sunday.
Counts even through Saturday and
The
Sunday.
only time it doesn't count through a regular calendar day is when it falls on.
If it falls on a weekend or a national holiday,
to the
nationally
next business
recognized
day.
holiday, it goes to the next
so
business day.
St. Patty's Day was not considered, just so you know, just a green beer day.
Yep, not a.
But if it was to fall on Labor Day, it would go to the next day because Labor Day falls on a Monday.
Exactly.
So it would go to Tuesday, 11:59 p.m.
Exactly. So if say it's a deposit.
Yeah.
So you have a buyer that has to make a deposit on a Monday, and that Monday just so happens to be Labor Day. Say that's the 3rd day. That day, that timeline or deadline moves to the next day at 11:59. So they have a full 24 hours to make that deposit or satisfy whatever the next contingency deadline is.
Right. So what I was saying, Nick's favorite thing to say though, if they sign the contract on the 11th, but the contract acceptance date was for the 10th, because these contracts expire.
Yeah.
The right question for a seller to say is, when do I have to answer by? So if they sign on the 11th, then we need to either cross out the 10 or we need to do an addendum
100%.
that says the effective date is the 11th.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of the time, people don't want to cross out the contract, make it look ugly. So at the same time you're doing that, do an addendum that says, hey, buyer and seller agree that the effective date is blank, whatever that day is, the 11th in this example.
Right.
And it'll make it clearer for all the parties, everybody involved, closing agent, lender, buyer and seller, as to when the buyer has to make the deposit, as to when seller has to be on the alert for when things are supposed to be done by the buyer. It just makes everything more clear for everybody, and you can address that right away versus going a week or two and then having something blow up.
Right. So you do need to read your contracts, because if it says business days, and let's say we go to contract, they sign on Friday. People, what's the first day you're going to count?
Well, it depends. So if
If it's business days.
Yeah. So if it's business days, it's going to be the next Monday.
But if it's calendar days, it's going to be Saturday.
Saturday. So then, it has to be very explicit in the as-is residential contract and the additional terms that both parties agree to business days. Usually see that with the relocation companies, as you said, or if they even use that contract, or any of these big investment companies. They try to make it business days so they have more time to do whatever they need to do, because inherently business days will give you more time.
Right.
If you have 7 business days or 7 calendar days, obviously the seven calendar days is a week. 7 business days, you might have the benefit of 2 different weekends. So I have an additional 4 extra days in the count. So or not, or more, if depending on what the timeline is.
But what's funny? So years ago, like many, many, many years ago, I got my mortgage license, right? And Saturday is a business day in the mortgage world. So could that be arguable? I'm just, this is the argumentative side of me. I'm just curious.
It could be, but it's not. It says
It's clearly
pretty clear on the
Saturday
contract.
and Sundays, they're out, even though that is a business day in the mortgage
There's
world.
a whole paragraph in the contract that talks about time, and it says time is of the essence. Time shall be calculated by calendar days. If it falls on Saturday, Sunday, or national holiday, then it doesn't count. Moves to the next business day. It's pretty clear in there. But you can make some arguments to Florida Bar and Florida Realtors to change it.
Yeah, I don't know. I was looking at somebody's stuff and realized they missed a date, and the other agent, it was like one day because it was a misunderstanding, and I was like, I can't believe they messed that up. But
yeah, one day could lead to tens, hundreds
thousands
of thousands of dollars, that are at risk. So, and the buyer, that would be on the buyer at that point.
So I really feel like if you're going to hire somebody, you really need to make sure you're picking somebody that understands what they're doing.
100%.
Or if you're going to hire your nieces, friends, cousins, relative from the old, wherever the heck they came from, I definitely think that you definitely need an attorney. So they can definitely give you a call at the 579. Did I get it right?
No.
Yeah, that's a store from when I was younger. My bad.
No, it's so it's very, it's very important. Oh, man, look, it's right there. You can read it.
779-5000. I should know it by heart by now.
You should, but you call my cell.
I know. I
so.
just call you instead. So if you ever need to get a hold of Nick, just call me. I'll get Nick on the phone.
Or 954-779-5000. You can always text it as well. So, but yeah, it's really important to have a agent who knows what they're doing, or even if they know what they're doing, to have a good team behind them. So everybody has a brain fart every now and then. I do. I ask, our managing attorney, I ask the other attorney in the office all the time. Stupid little questions that might not be a question that, they're questions I get every day. And, you just have a lapse and you're like, God, I'm so stupid for thinking like that.
Any interesting things that have happened recently in the industry for you that you thought is like something that really needs to be shared? Even something crazy, some deal that's just like unbelievable. And hopefully it's not one of mine, but.
New York attorneys think about real estate transactions a lot differently than Florida real estate attorneys do.
Yeah, give me an example.
I have recently a New York attorney contact me to try to transfer the property to another seller while under contract for some tax benefit that would have been done and achieved by the seller in New York. But we were under contract already. You can't just...
Well, you'd mess up the title too.
Yeah, it's a
and if they're doing
messy
FHA?
chain of title. You can't just go under contract with buyer and seller and then decide as the seller to transfer the property to another seller so they can sell it. You can't assign it like a buyer can assign a contract. The buyer can assign the rights to the contract to a new buyer if the contract allows. Seller, it doesn't work that way.
And even if the seller does transfer the property, then they're obligated to pay the commission to the realtor, because it says very clearly in the contract that if they transfer the property anytime within, it could be 90 days, 180 days, whatever you put on there, they're obligated to pay a commission.
So the listing agreement will say that. So there would have been, even if the listing agent was in agreement with it and allowed it to happen, there's still way too many legalities that can't happen unless they get out of contract with that buyer, then transfer the property how they want to transfer it, and then go back, the new seller hopefully go back under contract with that buyer. So it's a risk for the buyer, it's a risk for the seller, and I don't know what the reasoning they were doing there, but I had told the attorney that that's not a good idea. It sounds like you're trying to do tax fraud. Or so, he didn't explain exactly what he wanted to do, but it sounded
it sounds like to me that it was a primary residence and they wanted to get a second person on there so that they could each get the $250, which is the tax savings. It sounds like to me.
It sounds like it. I don't think it was their primary. I forget if it was their primary or not, because I know they're I don't know if they're homesteaded, but they live in New York as well. So that's the whole thing with the New York attorney.
Well, that's one thing I learned, is that you don't have to live here but one day. If you still want to make this your homestead, that's fine. But you can't have homestead in multiple places.
No. And I think the IRS will require you to be here for half the year plus a day. So you have to have it, yeah. So like.
But not for the tax.
No, for
office.
Florida is different, but for the IRS, it'll be a different standard. I don't know exactly. I don't want to start getting.
I think we need an IRS
law.
person.
Yeah, definitely not me.
So we do have a lot of great listings coming up. So if you're thinking about renting, you're thinking about buying, we've got a beautiful 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom, 3-car garage on the water with a pool for listed in Coral Springs. We've got amazing almost an acre in Coral Springs in the clusters. We have a lot of great stuff. So definitely reach out to us if you're thinking about buying. Nick can definitely help make sure you get clear title. I know that that's always a concern that, people ask me all the time. They're like, will the taxes be paid? Of course. Like, we can't convey the property over without having clear title. So
of course. There's a whole checklist that needs to be hit. So whether we're representing you as a seller or handling the title work as a buyer in Broward or Miami or Palm Beach, wherever, we can do anything in the state of Florida. We have certain things that we have to hit, and we don't close unless all of that stuff is cleared.
Right. And one of the other things is that people don't think about is that when you are buying, you want to make sure that you do get a title policy, because a lack of a title policy, there could be mistakes from before, even though it closed 2 or 3 times before. I've seen issues come up later on. So
100%. I mean, we had one where it was 20 years ago or 25 years ago. There's a legal description that was messed up, and without the title insurance, they would have been, pretty.
and that ain't easy to use either, the title insurance. So imagine without it, just a
Without
nightmare.
it, they would have been
Yeah.
in hot water.
Yeah.
Let's just say.
So if you need the best realtor out there, you definitely want to call me, Laura Sanders, Remax Direct, 954-650-0827. And if you need a great closing agent, give a shout out to JK Closings. We got CJ and Nick over there. They're amazing. Oh, and we got Trish.
Yeah.
Is there any other new lawyers over there that we don't know about?
Not yet.
Not yet? No, we're keeping it just the threesome.
The three, yeah, just the threesome.
What's a good number again?
The number is 954-779-5000. You can call and text it, and we'll get back to you.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Nick.
Thank you.
And until next time, thank you for listening and watching when streaming Making Money with Laura Sanders. Have a great night.
Thank you for tuning in for Making Money with Laura Sanders, a name you can trust. To join the conversation, call us at the studio, 888-994-4995 Studio A, or contact Laura directly at 954-650-0827. Laura Sanders, a name you can trust. We look forward to seeing you.